I wanted to do a quick overview of grammar, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page as we're moving forward. What I've found over the past couple of years of teaching this class and others is that all too often our students are not as up to speed on grammar as they probably should be, and so I wanted to go over a couple of things that I want to remind you about, so that your writing is as academically appropriate as it can and should be. So the first question that I have for you is why do we even have language, and what's it for? It might sound kind of simple, but or kind of silly to even ask that question, but I think it's important because what we're trying to do is to convey information and ideas to other people through writing, and that's why we have language. To the best of our knowledge, symbolic language, we're the only species on the planet that does symbolic language. So it's pretty unique for us to be able to do that. And it's also super interesting that we can, in the ways that, the varieties of different language that we have, but we all are able to convey, all of us humans are able to convey information, but we have to get it right. We have to get it right when we're thinking about academically appropriate language. So how many different kinds of languages are there? I think that's important to ask too, or how many different kinds of Englishes are out there, and it's unlimited. I mean, if you think about the different kinds of English that you hear every day, there's American English, of course, that's what we speak here in the States, but how many different kinds of English are there in the States? If you go to some of the deeper pockets of New England, it's almost impossible to understand some of the older people in the way that they speak, or down in Texas, the language and the English spoken in Texas is quite different from the English spoken in California or Washington State. If you just think about the variations in English here in North Carolina, from the mountains to the language spoken out on the coast. People in Ocracoke on Ocracoke Island have an incredibly specific way of speaking, which is rooted in Old English or older variations of English that came over from England in the 1500s and 1600s. So the varieties of English just in the States are pretty incredible. But we also have all kinds of British English. How many different kinds of British English are there across the way? Welsh and Irish English, and Scottish is almost its own language. It is its own language, but Scottish English is sometimes almost impossible for those of us in the States to understand. And you have Australian English and Singaporean English, and just there every kind of variation. Jamaican English. There's so many different variations. So there's not one right English, and that's kind of the point that I want to make, because there's not one right way to speak. But when we're talking about academically appropriate uses of English, there are very specific ways that we want to make sure that we use that language. All right, so where does English even come from? Let's think about this. So what we have is coming out of the Middle East. Lots of things came out of the Middle East, and one of those was the precursors to English. And that language that came out was called Proto-Indo-European language. And if you can see from this image here that I have, it originated in the Middle East, in the Iraq-Iran kind of area that we identify now, and it spread eastward out into India and in through Central Asia. But it spread west also in through Turkey and Italy and Greece and what is now Western Europe, into France and up into England, some of the Scandinavian countries. So English has its roots in this Proto-Indo-European. English is a form of Germanic language, and comes from a Proto-Germanic. If you see from this chart here, it explains the different ways that this Proto-Germanic language broke down and created all these languages that are very similar in structure and use to English. So English and Frisian. Frisian is a language that's spoken on the north coast of Europe. And you have German, of course, and Norwegian, and Danish and Swedish, and they're all very different, but structurally they're very, very close and very similar. So the one of the problems with English is that English is an amalgamation of a bunch of different languages, and that makes it kind of tough. If you were to compare structurally English to something like maybe Japanese, you would see that there's in Japanese is kind of a structured language, very kind of hermetic kind of a language, where English has taken on all kinds of different um, influences over the years. So if we, so in England, if we go back before 1066, we had Old English, and we had various, Scots and Welsh and Celtic languages that were mixed in England, what is now England. But we know that in 1066, the Norman invasion brought French into what is now England, and so with that, they brought a kind of a two-tiered system of language. In the court system, and with the church, and with kind of the higher classes of people in post-Norman invasion England, the prestige or the premier language would have been French or Latin. And then the common people would have still spoken an older form of English that was developing over time as well. But what happened from 1066 on is that English started to incorporate a lot of the French and Latin, and also, there's still some Scandinavian influence as well, from the Scandinavian languages, from the Viking invasions that were coming in from the northeast. And then also, there's a very small amount of Celtic in English, but there was a little bit of that influence as well. So what happened is that instead of having a more pure language, English has really become a really tough language to speak, because it's been influenced by so many different factors, and so it makes it tough to sometimes to speak. I've heard that it said that English is the easiest language to learn, but it's the hardest language to learn to speak correctly. And so let's just look at this one example that I use often. How would you pronounce this word, Ghoti? Well, by the rules of English and the way that we pronounce, if you were to use these sounds cobble this together, sounds from different words. If you were to use the GH sound from rough, the O sound in women, and then the TI like in ambition or ignition or something like that, you would get the I, and the TI gives a sh. So, by the rules of English, and by the ways that we can combine different sounds with different letter structures, symbolic structures, Ghoti can very well spell out fish. So it's just kind of an example of how silly sometimes our language can be, because there's not a clear defined structure. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about grammar. All right, prescriptive and descriptive grammars. So descriptive grammar, that's just when we're saying this is what's happening in the language. We're not making any judgment about it. Prescriptive is when we start to make those judgments and say what is right, what is wrong, what is better, what is less good in a language. And we've all been told that before, especially around kids. Hey, that's not the right way we say something. That is a prescriptive outlook on grammar, as opposed to descriptive. And that gets into linguistics and stuff. Don't worry too much about it. I want you to remember that English is a subject-verb-object language. And what that means is that in English, we prefer to hear subject-verb-object. If you look at the example down here, the girl threw the ball. So the girl is the subject, the verb is threw, and the ball is the direct object here. The girl is doing a thing to some other thing. So that's what we like to hear. When we think about passive sentence structure, that would be something more like the ball was thrown by the girl, which we just don't like to hear in English because of the way our language works. We just prefer to hear that subject-verb-object. So far too often in academic writing that I review my students, I see a lot of passive sentence structure, and it's okay. It works, but it would more often than not that active sentence structure would work much better and is a much cleaner feel and sound to it. So. In English and in all languages that I'm aware of, we have first, second, and third person is called voicing, and so in the first person voice is I. second person is you, and then the third person is he, she, it, they, them, those things when you think about who is doing the actually speaking. What I'm going to ask of you and try to remind you time and again, you'll probably see this in the comments and the notes that I give you, is that I want you to pick one of these and stick with it. Okay, and what you're gonna find yourself doing, or you may find yourself doing, and definitely will probably find when we're doing our peer reviews, is that people are gonna switch to that second person all too often. You're gonna start out with a I or a he or a she or something like that, and then switch into second person. What that tells me is that you're not paying attention to your writing, or that you are uncomfortable with what you're saying. That's a quick signal to tell me as a reviewer that as soon as you switch into that second person, that you, if you haven't started out with it, it means that you're uncomfortable with what you're doing and not completely comfortable with the writing that you're undertaking. And so when you're doing your review, you should look for that and try to switch your writing back in. I do it myself. I catch myself doing it. I have to rewrite from time to time, and so it's no big deal. It's just one of those things that we tend to do from time to time, but you can clean it up with a little quick editing. It's no problem. Sentences have two parts: the subject and the predicate. So basically, the subject is the subject. So in the sentence down here, this first sentence, the girl would be the subject. And then the predicate is basically the verb and everything after it. So you can have all kinds of prepositional phrases that attach to come after a verb. So in this case, the girl threw the ball to the boy on the mound at the thing, blah, blah, blah. So you can keep going with prepositional phrases all day long, and those will all be wrapped up in the predicate. All right, there are a couple of sentence types that I want you to know or to remember. First one is simple sentence, is the girl threw the ball. That's just one simple statement. A compound sentence is the girl threw the ball and she ran to first base. So in this case, these are two separate ideas, two completely separate sentences that we have combined with this conjunction and. All right, so if we look at this, the girl threw the ball is a completely valid sentence on its own. She ran to first base is a completely valid sentence all on its own. A complex sentence is one where there's one full complete sentence and one sentence fragment, and they're connected in some way because the sentence fragment requires information from the full sentence in order to be a complete idea. So if we look at this complex sentence example down here, the girl threw the ball. As we've said, that's a valid sentence on its own. But was tagged out is not. There's no subject here. There's a verb, of course, and a purpose and some extra information that comes after it. But this everything after the comma and the but requires the subject from the first part of the sentence, the girl. So that's a complex sentence, which is absolutely fine, no problem. But you just have to understand that that's what a complex sentence is. What I see too often, and which I really, 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 really don't like to see, is sentence fragments as being used as whole sentences. And so when we're doing your individual editing, and then when you do your peer editing, you have got to pay extra special attention to the fact that incomplete sentences, sentence fragments cannot be used in academic writing. It shouldn't be used at all, ever, in any kind of writing, but it's definitely in academic writing. All right, so a little bit more just to make sure we're all on the same page. Nouns are people, places, things, and here's the one that they never teach you in elementary school: abstractions. Abstractions are things like love or hate or patience or any of those things that we know are a thing, but it's nothing that you could put into a box and ship to your grandmother, or this isn't something that you could you put it under the Christmas tree. So abstractions are interesting ideas. Verbs are the doing words, of course. Pronouns are he, I, you, he, she, they, it, they, them, all of those words. I'm going to ask you to try to use as few pronouns as possible in your academic writing. I will probably tell you you're overusing pronouns. It's used way too often. Pronouns, and the reason I say that is that pronouns weaken your writing. They make your writing confusing, and they do not Um, they do not clarify what you're trying to say. So please stay away from using pronouns. Adjectives describe nouns, of course, and adverbs describe verbs. I don't understand why a lot of people say, don't use adverbs, don't use describing words. But I mean, if you weren't supposed to use them, I don't know why we don't have them in the language. So I don't have a problem with using adverbs because they describe something, and so use them. Prepositions, of course, describe place. They describe locations. So in some kind of a kind of relationship. So with, to, or over, for, by, those kinds of things. And then our conjunctions, of course, are and. Are those elements of language that connect to different clauses. All right. So speaking of clauses, let's see that we have two different types of clauses. One is an independent, which acts as a complete sentence, and then dependent clauses, as we saw in the girl throws the ball example, require an independent clause to be part of a complete sentence. So that's what we call those clauses. We have plurals, we have possessives, and we have plural possessives. That's another issue that I want you to kind of think about. So plurals, of course, are there to show that there are more than one thing, and possessives are ways that we modify words to show that something has ownership of another thing. So just remember generally that the apostrophes are almost always going to be used for possession, and plurals don't have apostrophes, not too hard. And then we have plural possessives. So like the if you have more than one boy, the boys' bikes, right? So you have a group of boys, and we're talking about their bikes. So we have to make sure that we're using the correct plural possessives. It's kind of tough. Don't worry about it. If you need help, we can help you out. I should never have to say this, but I'm gonna say it. Sentences start with a capital and end with some kind of punctuation. That's it. You don't get to choose. Sentences in English, unless you're writing poetry and you're E.E. Cummings, you don't get to start a sentence with lowercase. That's just, don't do it. It makes no sense. And if you do that, what it shows is that you're either not paying attention to what you're doing or you don't care. In either case, that's not academically appropriate work, so don't do it, okay? Verb voicing, active and passive, I talked about this about a second ago. So active voicing is the subject-verb-object kind of structure. So the man changes the diaper, right? So the man is doing a thing. Passive construction would be where the object comes before the verb and the subject. So in this case, the ditch was dug by the woman. This would sound much better if you say the woman dug the ditch. It's simpler, cleaner, and much easier to use. All right, so that's kind of a real quick, real fast review of grammar. Some of the things that I think are important for you to think about when you're doing, when you're starting out with your writing, and particularly when you're starting out with your reviewing. So the ones that are most important to me is sentences start with a capitalization and end with some kind of punctuation. Keep your verb tenses the same. If you're going to be in past tense, stay in all the way in past tense. If you're going to be writing in first person, it needs to stay in first person as opposed to slipping into second person of you. And then just making sure that your sentences are complete and full sentences. Those are kind of the main things that I don't know why people forget that, but it seems pretty simple to me, maybe. Anyway, so that's a quick little grammar review. I hope it's helpful. Thanks.